Thank you. Thanks all for coming. 24 hours ago, I didn't even know I would be here. Now I'm jumping in for two people who unfortunately can't make it. Christian Reber is sick and says sorry for not coming. And Florian Nöll from Bundesverband Deutsche Startups also can't make it. So I'm here to replace, at this moment, Florian Nöll from Bundesverband Deutsche Startups to give you a very short introduction and welcome. Basically, what are we talking about? Here in Europe, we have a great amount of talent. We have great universities educating a lot of great engineers, software developers, etc. But the war for talent is really intense. And especially in Germany, we are missing a key component to compete for talent against not only the Googles, Facebook, and Amazons of this world, but also increasingly against the Volkswagens, BMWs, and others who are in need of software developers. And the key component we're missing, because I'm speaking for my startup here, I can't pay market salary that compares to the salary that a Google or Facebook pays at the moment. So what I need to do as a pre-revenue or early revenue startup, I need to be able to attract key talent, especially from abroad, by giving out stock options and build a share incentive program. And this has multiple benefits for me and for the recipients of these options. One is it's a great incentive to actually join the company if you believe in the mission. Secondly, it aligns interests very nicely. And third, and it's a very important component that we tend to forget, third is, if you think in terms of an ecosystem that we're trying to build here, if we manage to give out shares to our key employees and we're successful as a startup and we IPO or have a big exit, then a lot of new business angels are created. So just to give you an example, when Twitter IPO'd, more than 1,000 millionaires were created, new millionaires were created. When Facebook IPO'd, over 600 new millionaires were created. Now, when Zalando IPO'd in Germany, I'm not 100% sure, but I think around 12 to a maximum of 20 new millionaires were created. Even if you adjust for the size of the IPOs, it's a factor of 10 or 20 compared to Twitter. And I think this is something we need to change, because those new millionaires become business angels and reinvest their knowledge, their network, and at least part of the money they made into either their own startup, so they become founders. We all know about the PayPal mafia that was built on the PayPal success. Or they become business angel investing into other founders. And this is how, over time, and if you iterate this a few times, what you get is a robust ecosystem. And this is what the Bundesverband Deutsche Startups is really interested in helping to create, and that's why we are here. And that's why we thank Index for actually hosting this event and for the initiative, Not Optional, which is a great initiative. You can read the report, which sums up the problem and the options we have to solve it very nicely. I also want to thank the family for giving us the space and hosting us, and of course for all the great speakers and panelists, both from other startups as well as from politics, for coming tonight. Yeah, and let's kick this off. Thank you.
So, good evening from my part. My name is Janosch Stelker. I'm a journalist. I work as a correspondent for Politico here in Berlin. And I'm overseeing our coverage about artificial intelligence here in Europe, which means I'm talking to AI entrepreneurs a lot. And when I ask them, you know, what's needed to sort of boost an AI ecosystem here in Europe, they say, A, it's money, it's capital, B, it's data and access to data, and the third thing is talent. And then at the same time, I talk to a lot of policymakers. I still go to the parliament a lot. That's why I look the way I look. And then I talk to policymakers and they tell me the entire, like the completely same thing. They say, you know, it's money, data, and talent. But when you look at the specific measures that are being taken, there seems to be a focus on the two first aspects. So when it comes to money, the European Union announced that it's going to spend 20 billion of public and private funding on AI soon. National governments are announcing similar measures. When it comes to data, there are several initiatives that have been kicked off to sort of pool public and private data. They come with their own problems, but the point is, you know, there's sort of an emphasis there as well. But when it comes to talent, there seems to be sort of less attention that's spent on that. And the question is, why is that? And that's what we would like to discuss tonight. When you ask startup founders, and this is something that Christian Vollmann just laid out very sort of like, you know, clearly that is a problem, that there's such little attention on this question and problem of talent. And in the letter published in January, the startups warned that, and now I want to quote, this lack of cutting-edge people is starting to become the biggest bottleneck for the startup ecosystem here in Europe. One key obstacle in attracting talent is that it's much more difficult for employers here to give their staff shares of the company. And why? Again, a quote, it has to do with the fact, according to the open letter, that employee ownership is governed by patchy, inconsistent, and often punitive rules. So why is that, and what should Europe and Germany do about that? That's what we would like to discuss this evening. And the idea is to have both sides of the table here and discuss that with each other. We'll first hear from entrepreneurs and investors, and later they will be joined by German lawmakers to discuss the issue, and I'm very much looking forward to that. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce and welcome our first 4 panelists on stage, and then I will introduce them each individually. I'm going to start all the way to the left, someone who doesn't need any more introduction because he's already been introduced, but Christian Vollmann, once again, is the founder and CEO of Nebenan.de, and is also an angel investor. Verena Huberts is the co-founder and managing director of Kitchen Stories, which is a company that is known for the cooking app of the same name. Johannes Reck, right next to me, is the CEO and co-founder of travel company GetYourGuide, which is headquartered here in Berlin, just like Verena's company as well. And then, last but not least, Neil Reimer is a partner at Index Ventures, which is a venture firm he co-founded back in 1996, and it's now headquartered in both London and San Francisco. Yeah, welcome to all of you. If I could get the mic, because I want to direct my first question to you, Johannes. You took to Twitter just a few days ago and to vent sort of your anger about the situation, and you didn't take any prisoners there. You said, I quote, "It's time to accept that BMW, Mercedes and Deutsche Bank are unlikely to be the innovators and job creators of the future. The country is in the hand of its entrepreneurs, and we have lots of great ones, so let's put the incentives right." And then you said, specifically when it comes to this issue of employee ownership, you said that German politicians in charge, including Angela Merkel, her potential successor as Chancellor, Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer, our Finance Minister, Olaf Scholz, and others, are all aware of this issue, and they have been aware of this issue for years. Then why are we where we are? Like, why haven't they done anything about it?
Yeah, so I actually thought I used very polite words, to be honest. So I think, you know, so first of all, I think some context, like we need to understand where we're coming from, right? We started our company 9 years ago, and I remember very vividly that in 2010 when we got started, you know, I offered our first engineer the option to either have a % in the company or to have €1,000 more in salary a month. He chose €1,000 more per month. So I think that's where we're coming from, right? Today, the landscape is really, really different. You know, in Berlin, you know, cheap is no longer the unique selling point. You know, we are developing cutting-edge technology. You know, you're doing a lot of work in AI. And we are hiring talent from all over the globe. So at GetYourGuide, just to give you perspective, only 16% of our hires last year are German. You know, so like we're hiring a lot internationally from the US, from the UK, from the rest of Europe. And you know, increasingly, salary is just a tick box that they check. You know, and the real thing that they're asking for is, you know, what's the equity package, which I can absolutely understand. I think it's very entrepreneurial. And you know, all of the larger unicorn CEOs have brought this issue to attention with all of the politicians. You know, we've spent countless dinners, and the #1 question that every politician will ask is, why isn't Google and et cetera sort of like created here, right? So you know, why aren't you guys sort of like creating the next Google in some shape or form? And what we always tell them is, you know, so like, look, so you guys sort of like, you know, have to give us time, you have to give us capital, you know, and room to innovate, and then you have to put the incentives right so that actually the best talent joins our companies. And this gospel has been now preached for many times on many dinners with many politicians, you know, from a lot of people, including all of the companies that you know. Yet the problem is fundamentally that you know, in a politician's mind, there are always a lot of topics, right? And this topic still is so small to them that they kind of never get to it. And that's why I'm so delighted actually that Neil, who could do a lot of different things, and Index have actually now really put this topic on the agenda, because from an entrepreneurial point of view, it is the key pain point that we all face. And we just really need to make a lot of noise. I have not met, by the way, you know, just to give them credit, a single politician who disagrees. It doesn't matter whether they come from the left, because it's you know, it's really a, you know, social justice topic as well. You know, because employer ownership also means, you know, not only money for, you know, rich entrepreneurs and venture capitalists, actually also means money for employees, right? You know, it's definitely sort of like a topic for the liberal people. It's a topic for the conservatives. No one disagrees. It's just not yet important enough because there's not enough noise.
Okay, so you're saying, sorry, I have to grab your mic again. We only have 2, so we have to sort of rationalize tonight. So you're saying, if I'm paraphrasing that in sort of very simple terms, you're saying like they agree with what you're saying, they just don't care enough at the moment, apparently, or they don't put it as high on their priority list as they say. Marina, if I may ask you, is that something that you would agree with, like, or is that your experience as well?
Definitely. I mean, we were last year together at the Minister for Arbeitsministerium, what's that in English? Labor, Huberto Seil, and we also brought together a lot of entrepreneurs, and we discussed it, and everybody is on the same page. And the issue is not that we don't have employee stock options. The issue is it's really, really complicated to do the whole system. Like every European country is doing it in its own way. In Germany, is particularly bad at it. Why? Because we tax it as if it is income. So 50% will be taxed. Another thing is that we need to come up with a virtual construct. Otherwise, if we give a developer a stock option, they need to be taxed each year. And they didn't make any cent yet, because it typically takes, Neil and you would probably know better what the statistic is, but 6, 7, 8 years, or we can ask Christian, who just told me he started 4 companies already, not only 1, so serial entrepreneur. So it means that the employees are being taxed right away. And we really need to get ahead, especially here in Germany, and this is also what the European Union should be for. We should create a harmonized system in order to be able to compete against the US and against China when it comes to getting the best talent here.
Neil, let's pick up that point and let's migrate the phone.
We need more talent and we need more microphones.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you, it's just not on my priority list.
Touché.
You're sort of like your view from above, because you're based in Geneva, your company is everywhere in the world, you're in the US a lot, obviously. When you look on, like, sort of at Berlin from the outside, we do have a striving startup scene here now, but it's still like in the field I'm covering in AI, it's still behind, for example, London or San Francisco, where your company has its headquarters. Do you think this is a matter of, or it's due to regulation here and policy, or how much is that a matter of regulation and policy, or how much is that due to other aspects that Berlin is still lagging behind locations like London or San Francisco when it comes to the tech scene?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's Berlin per se, although you're right to point out cities and not countries, because that's where entrepreneurship happens. You know, that's where you get aggregations of young people who want to come together. So it's Berlin, but it's also Munich, and it's also you know, a handful of 3 or 4 other cities across Germany. Similarly, in the UK, it's largely London, right? And yeah, the UK has so far had a much more startup-friendly ecosystem, governmental framework. You know, their stock option plan thing works pretty well. You know, they got it. They made it a priority. London made it a big priority. I think, you know, Johannes put it very well. It's just, I've had the same frustrating conversation with lots of politicians. And behind closed doors, they'll all say the right things. The question is, are they going to make it a priority in their next election campaign? Are they going to hang their candidacy on that issue? Are they going to make it a strategic priority for the country? And the answer is no, in most of these countries.
What makes you think that?
Well, I mean, if you look at California, the state of California, which is now the 5th largest economy in the world, if it were a country, right between Germany, number 4, and the UK, number 6. California, you know, 200 years ago was, or 150 years ago, was only agriculture and some minerals. Agriculture is still a big part of the economy, but it's not agriculture that made it number 5. It's technology and it's media. That thrust is so clear to me, and I think to lots of people in the room, that, you know, countries have no option but to bet on technology and entrepreneurship as the growth engine of their economy. These are companies that are out of nothing creating wealth, but also creating thousands of jobs and helping their countries and their cities have better infrastructure, educate people. It's just a self-perpetuating force for good in the economy. And so, you know, this is why we think that this is an urgent thing. It's not an option. That's why we called it not optional. If you want to win, you have to do this. And if you don't want to win, you're going to lose. There's no option to just sort of sit still and allow the economy to be carried forward by heavy machinery, chemicals, and combustion engines. That's not the future.
Christian, to bring you in, sorry. You've been active here in the sort of startup tech scene in Berlin for many years. Founded your own companies, you've been an angel investor. Would you say, sort of like first part of the question, looking back during the last 5 or 10 years, things have become better when it comes to the regulatory framework? And what do you see as sort of like the key priority that should happen now?
Yeah, so I started way back in '99 with an internship. That internship today would be much more difficult because internships got limited. Just to point out that there's things that actually get worse. I think we've done quite a lot of lobbying. We've talked to lots of politicians, and yes, we've made progress on some fronts, you know. But I'm also missing the big breakthroughs that we need. And I think, I don't know if Neil or Johannes said it, but they didn't get it yet. I think that sums it up very nicely. You know, I think what we need is the understanding that we fundamentally need to change a few things that will enable us to really compete and attract talent, build world-leading companies in the technologies of the future, because this is what I think, and it's a generational thing, I pretty much believe. What I see is, I very often get the feeling that, you know, the older generation really more and more standing in the way and needs to understand that, you know, we need to hand over to the younger generation because they are creating the future. And what I'm missing is the big innovations in startup policy in Europe and especially in Germany.
Yes, please.
I don't mean to cut you off, but I just want to make sure that we're not missing one key point, which is, you know, there's a lot to be proud of in Europe in terms of where we are. We're not nowhere. If you look at the last 20 years, the kinds of companies that have grown in Europe, in Germany, in the UK, in France, you know, nobody would have believed 10 or 20 years ago that was possible. And the companies that have started again from nothing with little funding and a lot of hard work and creativity are now worth 5, 10, 20, 50 billion euros on public markets or in transactions. And that's really starting from a standing start in terms of entrepreneurship about 20 years ago. And we've been lucky enough as investors to see that whole thing play out. The question still remains, you know, okay, well, why is it not $100 billion or 100 billion euros, and why is it not $500 billion? And those are legitimate questions. You know, why is there not a Tencent? Why is there not a Google? Why is there not an Amazon? And it's been said, you know, the only thing keeping us from that is the lack of talent. It's not a lack of capital. There's no problem with capital. There's a lot of investors out there in Europe, and there are plenty of investors in the US or in China happy to invest in companies in Berlin. Series A, seed, anything you want. $100 million investment, a $500 million check. All of these things are possible. It's not capital. Capital will find the returns.
And you know, the great thing about this event tonight is that we're not only talking about lawmakers, but we have them here and we have them on stage in just a second. Neil, I would like to ask you one last question, because afterwards you will have to leave the stage because we're only allowed to fit 7 people. But your last question is, you mentioned the...
Or chairs.
You mentioned the big tech companies, and that's something that I'm curious about. How much do you see, you know, against this backdrop of sort of the regulatory framework, what role do they play in the sense of what they can offer their staff?
I mean, the big tech companies wouldn't be big tech companies unless they had these tools when they were smaller, right? So there are only 2 ways you can really attract talented young people to your company when you're starting out. It's the mission that they have to believe in and want to be part of. And it's the upside. They want a share of the upside. They are probably going to, you know, pass up a higher salary from somewhere else. But, you know, there's this idea that they share. And all of those companies benefited from that, whether it's Google or Apple or Amazon. In Europe, when those guys come here, you know, they're big companies. They're not startups anymore. They have armies of lawyers and accountants. They can afford to pay a lot of money. So even if they can't figure out this stock option thing, they can just shower people with money and pay for their apartments and all kinds of perks. And small companies can't do that. They don't have that capital. They need the capital to invest in other things. So actually, not fixing this problem and not simply saying, you know, I get it, Germany needs a best-in-class stock option scheme. There are plenty of countries that we can inspire ourselves from and just copy-paste and adapt it. Unless we do that, we're just making it easier for the big incumbent companies to hire all the talent, and you're basically making it impossible for the small companies to compete.
Can I add to that?
Please.
Because it's a really good point. So I think the double-edged sword that we really need to understand when it comes to the stock options is twofold, right? For the large companies like GetYourGuide, we are ultimately all competing with the US Silicon Valley companies. So as soon as you grow a large, successful company, at some point you will compete with the Chinese, you will compete with the US American.
Can you tell us how big you are again?
So we have, the core employees that we have here is now more than 500 people, growing very rapidly. Hundreds of million revenue. So at some point when you get to that scale, you will compete with Google, with Facebook, with all of the large conglomerates, and also with other competitive companies from China and the US. At that point, you need to compete for the same talent pools as well, right? You need to have competitive talent, and then you either have to dilute more and raise more funding because you need to compensate for all of the extra burden of tax, etc., that we have to pay here because we're hiring internationally. Or you accept that you get not the same quality of talent, which will deteriorate the company in the long run, right? So it's actually a really sustainable structural disadvantage that, straight to the question, why can we not create the $50 to $100 billion companies here? This is actually one of the key points why it's so difficult. The second part, and that is to me almost the even more important one, is that we often oversee is who actually are our next founders, who are the next crazy people who can put their money and their knowledge to work. And one of the things that I'm incredibly proud of is that a lot of the people who've left GetYourGuide have actually gone on to start their own companies. And oftentimes, because as Neil said, the markets are very liquid today, they can sell some of their virtual shares to the company or to investors, and they get a small paycheck. But because we make it so burdenful and we tax so highly, these payouts are so small at the end of the day, and we take the money away from the people that want to create, and thereby we completely shoot ourselves in the foot. So payout of $100,000, which is, or euros, which is a fantastic win for a company here, right? Actually, net creates 40,000 euros for the employee in the pocket. I mean, to me, I would actually, as a government, I would subsidize these 100,000 euros if they invested in the next company. That would be the smart thing to do. But instead, we actually take it away to pay for retirement funds or something like that, right? So I think that is that is a problem. And so, to your initial question, I couldn't agree more with Neil. I think the mindset change that we need to have fundamentally, and so I'm addressing the politicians in the room in particular. We cannot win in the long run by preserving the past. Right? So this is, I think, the biggest misconception we still have in German politics in particular. We talk a lot about national champions. Our politicians, when the rubber hits the road, they will support Lufthansa, they will help Deutsche Bank, etc., etc. That is, in my opinion, time wasted, because instead of helping these companies, we should help the next entrepreneurs create the future. Because it's much more likely that the next banking champion will not be a merger of Deutsche Bank and Commerzbank than Revolut, N26, and next challenger banks, right? I mean, in this room, this might be a lot more obvious, but this is not obvious to our politicians yet. And it's really in the hands of the young people in the parliament to change that.
Okay, that's just sort of like... That gives us just the right moment to actually invite the lawmakers up on stage. Neil, thank you for now. If I could ask both of you to sort of move to the outward chairs. First of all, to my left, Bettina Stark-Watzinger. She's a member of parliament for the Free Democrats, the liberal opposition party. And she is the chairwoman of the Finance Committee in the Bundestag, among other things. Bonja Kemmer is a member of parliament for the Christian Democratic Union, which is the party of our Chancellor, Angela Merkel, which is also currently leading a government coalition with the Social Democrats. And in the Bundestag, Bonja Kemmer is a member of the Committee on Education, Research and Technology Assessment, as well as the Committee on the Digital Agenda. And last but not least, Daniel Bayas is an MP for the Green Party. He's a member of the Finance Committee, and he's also overseeing his party's startup policy. And the Greens are currently in the opposition as well, but if recent polls are to be believed, that could change at some point. But also an opposition party in our parliament. My first question would be...
Bad tongues, by the way, say Green wins the polls, but don't win elections. But we want to change that.
Okay. Different topic. Ronja Kemmer, my first question to you. You know, there has been, you've heard it. You've been here, you've followed the discussion. You heard sort of the assessment coming from the startup industry. What's your reaction? Why isn't anything happening? To sort of like paraphrase what we heard from the industry.
Well, to pick up that point, talking about the Greens, they could have been in government actually. So maybe if we had another government now,
should have never brought it up.
Including the three of us, we would have another discussion today. But to get the
so
point,
it's the Social Democrats.
No, or to make the point exactly, I think it lies in the coalition treaty that only says we will examine some further instruments about financial participation or employee participation, and we will examine to translate it to the normal world means it might come, it might not come. So I think we didn't put enough effort at that part. And yeah, now discussing it, I'm not a member of the financial committee, but now discussing it with colleagues from my party, from the Social Democrats, I think we have like some maybe really German problems and a lot of maybe too much lawyers in the parliament at all that always telling you why it is not possible. So, and that is really the problem. I mean, first of all, the first point is that people say, okay, you can't distinguish with stock options for startups, and you have to find a solution that is valid or that is going well for every sort of company, so for startups, for middle and small and medium-sized enterprises, but also for big companies. So why? Why can't we not make any exemptions? I don't get it. That's
why?
Yeah. So yeah. So, but that's a really German thinking, okay. I guess, and it goes further. That talking about stock option, you have to give to every employee in your company. I think also that isn't a solution for startups, of course. So that is also an issue we have to find, but I think we can find solutions.
What do you think about the solution proposed in this?
Well, I'm really thankful for the initiative, because I think what was said before, like the really two main points, first of all is we have to find more solutions that really implicate a fundamental change. It's not about optimizing a system that worked like for decades. It's about finding really new solutions. That's the first point. And the second point is you have to give yourself a noise. You have to be loud. And I think that is really worth it, what the initiative did till now, that you gave yourself a noise. So thanks for that.
Okay, thank you. Bettina Stark-Watzinger, you are in the opposition.
Yes,
which means you can fire away with your criticism and tell us what's your analysis. Why doesn't this government sort of do what it's been told, as we hear behind closed doors from its entrepreneurs?
Quite a bit has said already. First of all, it's my first term in the Bundestag, and you know, when you're there first time, I mean, you're overwhelmed how formal it is. So I'm quite happy that Danielle is in the Finance Committee, because you know, to have people who are not been there for 20 years and just follow the formal rules is quite refreshing. I think a lot is said. My impression after this 1.5 years now is that the zeitgeist is quite different in Germany. We had a long period of economic growth, and I think you said it, Johannes, we try to keep the status quo. It's protecting, no risk, protecting what we have. Look at what we have now as industrial strategy from the Ministry of Economic Affairs. It is, you know, having national champions, where we should be more challenging and have more German mood. To take on risks and start something new. And I think that's a prevailing zeitgeist. And you said you hire only 60% of people here from Germany. I think that should... 16. Yeah, oh, sorry, yeah, 16. You know, when I see statistics that over 40% of young people want to go into the public sector, that makes me quite nervous, because we have to start much earlier to have that, you know, spirit of entrepreneurship. And then again, looking at myself, for a long time I thought that funding would be the problem. And now we start to understand that talent is a problem, and I like the propositions you made. Having said that, you know, it's always easy to say we do tax exemptions. I think we should have, we should maybe make life more easy for everybody and make it more easy and lower tax it overall, rather than having very, very specific exemptions. But of course, we can talk about some specific issues later on. Oh, no, yeah.
Yes, I think I'm sure everybody wants to know the specifics. But let's bring in Daniel Bayas as sort of the third lawmaker in the run. What do you think? Hearing all of this, you're also you're not just a politician. You also, you have a business background. What do you think about all of this when you hear that?
I agree. I agree basically to the most things that have been said, and I agree that the zeitgeist has changed a lot. And Bettina, who's actually doing a great job in chairing the finance committee on a very formal basis.
Now just imagine them in one coalition, like those two parties.
I mean, I'm not on the same committee as Ronja, but I know that Ronja is doing a great job in all the tech, and we share a lot of panels recently. So I think there is a strong agreement also between the parties. And now the question is, what do we do with it? And your question is how do we push basically politics to move forward? And I think what we need to, we need to strengthen the narrative that no matter what technology we talk about, AI, blockchain, industry 4.0, and so how do we attract more venture capital? All of these questions don't make sense if we don't give an answer to the question that's right here. How do we attract more talent, right? And let me draw a bigger picture for a moment. It's not only about talent and startups, right? We have 100,000 slots in apprenticeships every year where we don't find kids where to place them. We still have an educational, school education, let's say, which are not teaching the instruments and the pedagogical concepts of the 21st century. We still don't have the qualification and training how to master the transformation of the labor market and so on. And I think the key question is how do we give the social market economy, where I'm a big fan of, a digital update, so to say, yeah? So that corporate pay taxes, and so we have competition on data and not monopolies, and how do we organize the transformation of the labor market and how we attract talent. And one of the instruments is something that we've discussed today, giving out incentives. And one of the colleagues that was here on the stage earlier said an interesting thing. He said, yeah, look at the big companies from the US, all of them had this instrument, and that's why they are successful today. It was you. And I think there are some very strong examples for Germany as well. I have the fortune that there is a big company in my constituency, SAP. Yeah? Maybe not one of the tech companies of the last 10 or 15 years, but was founded in the 80s. And the employees that started with SAP, the first 1,000 employees were well off by today, and who are very proud to have started and worked for this company. Yeah? It's a very strong example also to show the relevance to German politics and say, okay, if we want to build the Mittelstand of tomorrow or the big players of tomorrow, that's something that we need. I think this is the story and the narrative we have to strengthen to get politics to move forward in this case.
I want to pass it on to Verena Humertz. You hear this? Are you convinced?
It's great that we are all on the same page. We really got to get it going, and I also believe that we as founders, we need to engage in politics, and I'm also a member of a party which is not present here today on stage, so the Social Democrats. And I actually have Jens Zimmermann coming to my startup on Friday, and I'm going to hand out the little booklet and also emphasize that this is where we really need to get going. And it's not on the agenda, apparently, currently in the Koalitionsvertrag, as you said, but if everybody sees the issue, and if for the last 10 years we've been talking about what are we doing in terms of digitization, now we've finally come to talk a little bit about education with the Bildungspakt, now being able to have the cooperation abilities between the different states, because in Germany everything is so complicated due to our system, Föderalismus, what's the English word? Federalism? Chaos, yeah. But I also believe we need to have that chaos, yes. That mood, I really like that sentence, mood and outlook and a vision of where we want to head as a company. And I believe it has a lot to do with education and building role models and also getting that positive mindset. It's not bad if you fail. You can fail 1 or 2 or 3 companies, and your 4th one will be maybe the successful one. And that's why you're also part of startup teams, right? we support an initiative here in Germany as well, where we want to get that skill set more into the schools. And not everybody needs to do a digital startup. It's also fine if you do your company, which might be, not a startup in Berlin, but you create 50 or 100 or 200 jobs. And we definitely need a mind shift in that regard.
I want to give that back to the lawmakers right away, but I want to give Christian Vollmann a last chance, because I know you have to leave at some point.
Yes, I have to leave in 10 minutes. There's one point I want to highlight before I leave, and that is that I've been talking to politicians about fostering innovation and startup culture in Germany for over 10 years now. And one of the main problems it comes down to is us agreeing on we would need a more entrepreneurial mindset. We would need more young people to think about founding, to see it as a career option. And then it very often the discussion comes to the point that, well, but we cannot change the minds of people, and this is a mindset issue, and the politicians can't do anything about it. And now here, I think we have a topic where we actually can do something about it, because if you are an early employee at a successful startup, this is the best education to be a future entrepreneur you can get. I'm one of the examples. I did an internship. I didn't own any shares, but I did an internship at a company called Alando, which became eBay in '99. And ever since, I knew exactly what I wanted to do, to become a founder. Before that internship, I wanted to become a doctor. And Johannes said it, those early employees that had shares, whether it be SAP or Google, they saw it play out perfectly well for them. So they have this entrepreneurial mindset. They know it can work, so they are more they take risks, and they want to repeat that success. And so here we are, all agreeing that this is what we want to do. So I think, we have to move from, it's not an Erkenntnisproblem anymore, but it's an Umsetzungsproblem. So let's start changing it.
And that would be exactly my question to you, Bettina Stark-Watzinger. Your party wasn't in the parliament during the last term. You're back in now. So sort of like seen from the outside, when it comes to the Umsetzung, what is the political problem? Why doesn't it sort of like really on political terms doesn't work out?
I mean, you're fully right. We all say the same, and we fully agree. But let's get going. Let's do something. And I think yes, we can. I'll give some precise answers in a minute. But let me say that as a politician, I think you as a leadership, you have to allow people. You have to trust people, and you have to see, to judge people as being empowered citizens, and this is not happening because we always try to protect people from taking their own decisions. If you start in a, if you enter into a startup and you take risks, that's difficult. We have to protect you. So that is a mindset as political leaders we should change, and we have a good starting ground because we have a good social security system. So if somebody fails, there is something that supports you. I think what we have to do is, yes, we have to start little bits and pieces to change that mindset. And one would be to come to international terms with the employee stock option plan, so that we are attractive for international people to come here. So we have more people to help us building the startups, letting them grow, and also change the mindset we have. We also have to look at labor laws. I mean, we had this huge debate in Bundestag the other day where we said, we want to change labor laws from 8 hours per day to a weekly number of hours you work. Let's people decide. You have a project and you want to work for 12 hours a day, and next day you have time off. Let's do that. Weekly working. No, we have to protect people because they're gonna be exploited, and so we have a lot of small things we can change to allow to nurture these startups to become bigger and bigger. And we have to two things when it comes to employment stock schemes. First of all, international standards. We have to raise the amount that is tax-free and free of social security. I mean, we had 2009, we had the last round of discussing it. Even Angela Merkel said it's one of her crucial things in her chancellorship. And after 3 years, we ended up with 360 euros per year that are tax-free and are social security free. So we have to come to international standards there. And what is also important, I think, is that tax burden only hits in once liquidity comes in. So we have to change our tax system in a way that you only have to pay once you have liquidity. But again, I rather have it simple for everybody and not only for specific issues.
Ronja Kemmer, how does that sound to you, like that pitch?
Well, I totally agree. And talking about how can we change the mindset and how do we get more people to be willing to become an entrepreneur, I think we can really do something. First of all, of course, we need a lot of role models. That has to do with the, I would say, with the complete framework, talking about startups. So, secondly, it's also about incentives, yeah, about being willing to participate, and this is why I think this initiative is so good. Creating more options. And the third point is, as you just said, is about education. And we are really lacking behind. I mean, it's really good now we're having the Digitalpakt Schule, but it's just the first step. I have to say, and we really have to put more effort on it. It's not only about technology, it's about training the teachers, and it's even more about implementing new methods of learning. So there's really a lot of stuff to do, and I think going through all these issues, we need more alliances. Alliances, I would say, between opposition and coalition, but also between the parliament and organizations. And that is really why I want to appreciate that you organize yourself and that you're giving yourself, as I said before, a voice, because I think we need more of these alliances.
Daniel Bayers, what's your sort of reaction to the pitch that came from the Free Democrat side to say, you know, tax cuts, international standards, and then also, you know, sort of conditions tied to liquidity?
First of all, I think international, especially European standards, is great. Also because I think there are more and more startups. It's not only a startup topic, it's a topic for many companies who are working cross-border. So why should we confront them with different rules and so on? So I think that we need a European answer on that. And if you ask me for a figure, I don't know, but let's raise it from 360 euro to, let's start with, I don't know, 5 grand a year or something. That would be a good start. And of course, taxation needs to conclude when there's a cash flow rather than when you are getting richer on the paper because you want to keep your shares. And the other question is that you raised, and it's also my experience now being in the Bundestag for, I don't know, 1.5 years, is we have no knowledge and information. We have no lack of information, but we lack execution. And I think this is for many topics. Yeah, let's take 5G. South Korea has just announced 100% 5G, and we are still in the era of how do you say, versteigern, yeah, to sell the frequencies and so. Just to benchmark this, yeah. And I think we need to speed up. And the question is how do we do it? And I think the one answer, and it's an ugly answer, and I think this is cross-party. This is to all governments, yeah, and it's all government in states, and the Greens are in charge in many states within Germany, and we used to be in the government as well. Is political priorities. And the economy is running well now for 10 years, and everybody was proud, especially the finance ministers, that we had the so-called black zero, yeah, die schwäbische Hausfrau. We weren't spending more money that we had, but the question is, where did we spend the money on? Very expensive, very ineffective projects, Mütterrente, Rente mit 63, Baukindergeld, I don't know, who doesn't understand, ask his neighbors, they will explain, but the Germans in the room notice. No, and I think it's a serious question because now we are moving into an era where the economy is going down, and the question is, where are we investing in the future? And there are many topics, yeah? And I'm very concerned in this. And I'm from the Greens, I have to say that, we are now exiting coal, that's a good thing. And the government is planning to spend 40 billions in the structural transformation of the areas that are being hit by that. And of course, we need to take social aspects into account. But if I divide the 40 billions by the number of jobs that are affected, that's 1 to 2 millions for each job in the coal industry. If I think about using this money and putting it out in an innovative ecosystem for startups, I mean, It's a completely different story. And again, that's about political priorities. But where can we push forward when we talk about execution? I think politics is the one thing, and the other is about public administration. And of course, we have big troubles with our public administration. And maybe a question that's as important as that is, how do we open up public tenders for startups? Because they don't have the track record of 10 years and so many projects. And I think this wouldn't only be a benefit for the startups, it would be a benefit for public institutions and of citizens as you and me when we ask to prolong our passport and so on. So these are questions we have to answer. We have to give answers to in order to be more flexible, to have more drive on the execution side, and that's something that politics needs to decide, and we better decide it very soon.
I want to pass this on to Johannes. I mean, I'm sure like the last. I'm sure the last part you can agree with, but when it comes to, for example, the idea of 5,000 euro, what do you think about that?
Well, so I think the 5,000 euro, that doesn't really, so that figure doesn't matter. I think the critical part was set here. So first of all, we have to have the ability to really give out real ownership in the companies, and it has to be taxed when the money actually flows, and that is not the case right now, right? That's the critical part why we have this entire workaround of a virtual scheme where we promise a cash bonus that, you know, has all of the social security and sort of like church tax and sort of like social solidarity tax and all of the wonderful taxes we've invented in Germany on top of it. And that is why so little of the proceeds actually end up with the employees, and why the companies themselves have such a big headache with the entire program. And that actually needs to change. And I'm sorry, Ronja, I have to put you on the spot here, but your entire party leadership that is in charge right now can change this. And they even have it in the coalition agreement. And these people here even seem to be able to help you, right? So what I still don't get, honestly, and this is really something that I would ask from you, is like, why can't we move this forward? What really prohibits us from moving this forward? I've kind of like knocked on all of the doors, and everyone agrees. So like we have this same round, like the way how we have it here tonight. I've had this now 5 times at least, with all of the senior officials in the party. And for me, as a German entrepreneur, it really makes me sad, because the one thing that we don't have is time. We don't have another 5 to 10 years to wait until the grand seniors in the parties finally come to their senses that maybe it's a good idea to have employee ownership in German companies, because by that time the technological revolution will not stop. It will just continue to accelerate, and it's accelerating at a tremendous pace. And everyone who spent some time with the tech companies here knows that. So the thing that I would really, really ask from you is, don't let this evening go by like another cocktail hour with a couple of nice conversations with people here from Berlin, but really make it, thank you very much, that's a very nice compliment here, but really make it a priority, push it in the parliament. I think it's something that is incredibly important to do.
You were put on the spot, so you have the opportunity to respond to that. Why isn't it happening so far?
Yeah, well, as I said before, I'm asking the same question, and I think this is really what was said before. We need more German mood, and we also need it in the Bundestag. And even if not every single detail is clear before we make a law, just do it. And if something isn't working, we can still negotiate it again. And I think this is really we can't give the answer, we're not doing it because we're not sure about some certain points. We just have to do it, and if it doesn't work, okay, renegotiate it, and then will we work better.
Yeah.
I just want to add one little thing. I think, again, I think it is a generational thing to some extent, and I think our young generation, we have to increase the pressure, we have to be less respectful, and I know it hurts because we were raised to treat our parents and grandparents with respect, but I think it is time that we up the pressure and really tell the old, grand policymakers that we're running out of time and we really have to change a few things. And this is not disrespecting what they have achieved in the past, but I honestly think it's time to up the pressure.
If I may ask Verena Hubert, in the initial tweet that I read out about Johannes, he said that, or I'm paraphrasing that, but in there was this idea that the sort of big corporate big shots in Germany from back in the day, they're better heard than the voice of startups. Is that something that you would agree with?
I mean, with the company size and the monetary power comes more power to have your little office here in Berlin and meet all the members of the parliament all the time. So definitely that's an issue that we have as startups. Like, we don't really have the opportunity to build the relationships to politicians, and that's why it's really important. So I definitely agree, like Neil and Index Ventures, like putting it up on their agenda, because you guys could also be focusing on the US and you say, well, it's a great big market and let's have more fun in the US and forget a little bit about the European folks over there. And Bundesverband Deutsche Startups, which are also representing us all. So it's definitely the channels where we need to make noise, but also employee stock options for me is not only a startup instrument. Like, I have a good friend working at Amazon in Munich, and he also got some options, and he's really proud to work at the company. And he says, well, my salary is not really what's driving me. I want to really participate. If we can really get those things done in the next 5 years, it's really like a thing, the Genossenschafts thinking. And that's why I also believe, especially some parties in the Bundestag should really see it as an opportunity to align people, to get them, to have them feel that ownership. It's not always us against them. It's also the discussion we have about Betriebsrat in a startup. We don't need that because we're all in one boat anyways. And how can you get that mindset in all of the different companies? Because now we are transforming as a whole, as Germany. And in order to do so, we also need the people in the car companies. At BMW, I have a friend, and they leave Fridays 1 o'clock. They have like Weißwurstfrühstück at 11 a.m. and then they leave at 1 p.m. And I mean, what about e-mobility and all of that? Like, Germany is going down, like the traditional industries. The startups don't really get the opportunity to rise. And that's why we need a vision of where we want to be in 20 years. And I'm not really seeing a lot of confidence in a lot of politicians. And also, if you look into the Digitalrat, I looked at the photo. If the only guy that's kind of standing out is the founder of ResearchGate, and everybody else is like a professor of artificial intelligence. And it's like, I don't really see the inspiration happening there. And that's why I think it's important, no matter where you engage, because we need people. The elections, 26th of May for the European Parliament, all go, you saw it for the upload filter, how many young people also walked on the street, and I can only repeat myself. This is where we actually need to put the pressure and a lot of topics on the agenda. And the more smart people, the more diverse people engage, the less lawyers, the less teachers we have in the parliament.
And speaking, just, you know, we're sort of like approaching the end. So speaking of inspiration, I would like to conclude this with one round where the entrepreneurs among you can sort of express one wish that they have for something that should happen soon, and the lawmakers among you can make one promise that something that they sort of you know, say that they will take with them from this conversation tonight and sort of like put into practice. And we'll start.
Well, I would just use the startup phrase, get shit done, right? So I think you know what to do. I think the next time when Index Ventures does the survey of not optional, I think Germany should not be on the last position of the survey, but should at least be in the Champions League ranks, right? So that's 1 to 4, I think, in German football language. So that would be my wish.
Usually I give a promise to my girlfriend, but not to the public. Let me think. I mean, what I hope we all can promise at least to take this issue very, very serious. And I think it's not the case that we heard it for the first time today. Yeah, I asked the government about it like already months ago, and so we just stick to it. Yeah, that's for example, that's my promise. But I also have a question, or let's say not a question, but I'm asking something where I need your support, because you correctly said people need to get loud. And I mean, you see people on, regarding the upload filter, or very controversial discussion, school kids every Friday going on the streets demanding for climate protection. I mean, people can be heard, but you need to get your ass up as well. And one thing that I'm very much concerned when we talk about attracting talents, because you said a lot of people are from international, have an international background, is we need to get back to have a positive sentiment towards migration. Because I'm really sick about talking about refugees all day long. I strongly supported the Chancellor when she opened up the border in 2015. A lot of people were coming in. I think integration is a crucial topic, but I'm really sick of having the debates about, like we talk about migration in a very negative way. In the United States, and I'm not talking about the Trump United States, but the United States as we remember it, wouldn't have come the United States if they would have like a very positive sentiments towards migration. And let me put it very clear, if we see people are being attacked in Chemnitz, or if we see people wearing a kippah in Berlin are being attacked, we need to also get loud and protect the open society. If we want to attract talent, we need to stay an open and a liberal country. And I think that's where we need your support also. Maybe you don't have to go on the streets on a Friday, but really, as Joe Kesa from Siemens basically really speaks out loud to say, okay, we want to be an open society, because an open society and a successful economy are two sides of the same medal, and I think we need to agree on that. So maybe that's also, I'm demanding from you, that's where we need your support.
Yeah, well, I would say support the initiative, but to be honest, in the end you need majorities. And that is what I said before. I think we need more thinking about majorities or alliances over parties, over parliament and organizations. And we need, as you just said, I think we need an alliance of the young generation. So that was really what I would conclude today. Again, it's not of course the first time, but we need more alliance between young people, showing their will, naming what they want, and yeah, that would be for me the main point today. I said it in the first sentence, to support the initiative, but in the end you need majorities. I mean, I can say I support the initiative, but I myself, I will make a majority in the parliament. So that is why we need, I think, more alliances.
Well, what I can promise you is, and this is what I take from tonight, is this, getting this sense of urgency. And also, the power you have, the energy you, how do you say, the energy I can feel, having you here. I remember my first time when I met an entrepreneur, when I started in politics like 12 years ago, and I said, what can I do for you, like politicians do? And he said, do nothing, right? Let me do my job. And I think this is something we have to learn. Two promises. I keep this evening and maybe further evenings or talks, as something pushing me, that we always will raise the voice and not stop, even doing little progress. And the second promise I forgot right now, but I'll tell it you in a minute.
Yes, since we were talking a lot about stock options, I don't want to repeat the point, but make another point, and that is we need the most diverse and talented people in startups in our companies. Yet in Germany, not enough women are in leadership positions. 12% of startups are founded by female founders. And what is an issue like this? We see it also with friends. This, like, if you have your first child in Germany, this is an issue. Like, you don't really get a Kita-Platz. Kita shuts down at 5. You hardly make up jumps on the career ladder anymore. And we need to get that mindset off the table. That family and working, it's a 9 to 5, and then there comes the family. There needs to be a blending of it, and we need to support, especially female founders, because if they have a child, they don't really get all the benefits as if they were employed. And how can we promote more people starting a company? I started my company right out of uni. And I'm happy I did, because now I will probably be too scared if I hadn't had any financial backing. And you don't even get Arbeitslosengeld if you quit your job. So it's like getting the first 50K, getting started. I know the idea counts, but if you're not a serial entrepreneur and you talk to somebody, hey, I'm going to do a cooking app, and they say, good luck.
And here you are.
Yes.
Okay, being from Bundesverband Deutsche Startups, it's very hard to wish only for one thing. I definitely wish for a change in how we treat employee incentive programs. Another one we are working on since a long time is how can we get at least a very small portion of the money that sits in life insurance and pension funds into the asset class VC and startups. Another wish we have. But tonight we focus on this, so I just wish that we stop talking and start doing.
and this is something that I sort of like take with me. If I may summarize sort of the point that I heard from entrepreneurs is, you know, it's one thing to kind of like talk the talk and agree, but then it's another to walk the walk. And maybe it's about time to do that, and maybe there isn't so much time left. What I take away from the lawmakers is a clear statement: we hear you, and you know, we'll take that with us. He said, "We feel you."
Let's meet in a year again at the same spot and see where we are.
Okay, so the panel is over, the discussion isn't. There's going to be drinks, so continue the discussion on here, and thank you to all the panelists from my side.
Que la famille